In this video, we will be diving into what is earnest money and how it plays a role in the transaction. Hi, my name is William Singh. I'm a local real estate agent in the Portland, Oregon area. Now let's dive into what earnest money is. Earnest money is also known as a good faith deposit. And if you ever see it in a short form, it's typically as EM in text. So with that in mind, this is about a 1 to 2% of the purchase price. So for example, if you were to buy a home that's $500,000, the 1% or 2% of that would be about $5,000 to $10,000. This earnest money would go towards your closing costs and is, again, kind of think of it as a deposit. You're not adding on top of your closing costs and for any other costs associated. It's going towards those closing costs. So with that in mind, you can usually protect this pre-contingencies, and we'll be diving into that a little bit more at the end of this video. With that in mind, in most scenarios, you will be giving earnest money to the seller. So the question becomes, when do you deposit your earnest money? When the offer is accepted. Remember, the offer has to be accepted in order for us to really even start this process. Upon mutual acceptance, you will have 3 business days. So let's say that the offer is accepted on Friday. That timer doesn't start until Monday. So you would then have 3 business days to then deposit that money into escrow or title. Again, title and escrow are the same thing, so I will use this kind of interchangeably. With that in mind, you will then have to make sure that those funds are actually in your bank, and you have usually 3 options that you can really pick from. One is to wire money directly to the escrow company, and number 2 is to bring them a cashier's check. Number 3 is typically they have some sort of transfer system that they have in-house. Now, it's really up to you about how you want to be doing this, but just be very aware of the fact that there is wire fraud. So if you do decide to wire, which in my opinion is probably one of the easier ways to do things, but also you do have a little bit of risk, is to follow those wire fraud precautions. This means that you are Googling the name or asking me about who you should be calling to confirm all the details when you wire money. This is one of those things where people have gotten very, very, let's say, creative about the ways of how to essentially add a different number for you to wire money, and that's money that you could potentially lose. Now, to say that it's going to happen all the time, just make sure to take those precautions because it's something that is very needed. Now, with this in mind, understand that you want to have that cash in your bank. Now we're diving into one of the bigger questions is how do you protect your earnest money? So this is something I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. And this is one of those things where you usually have 2 major contingencies. One is being the inspection contingency. That means that if we find anything that is like a large foundation issue or something that you don't want to deal with, then this is your ability to kind of walk away. So for example, in an inspection contingency, usually you have about 10 business days to have the inspection, get everything done, and then discover everything about the house. Obviously, this can change if we're in a little bit more of a competitive situation in a seller's market where you're trying to reduce that timeline. So just keep that in mind as well. So if we get to that deadline and you say, okay, there's nothing wrong here, or there is something wrong here, then before that deadline occurs, we would be able to back out and you would protect your earnest money. The second major contingency that you'll find a lot of times is financing. So this is another situation where, let's say that you lose your job, you are unable to buy the house, or you're not lendable anymore. This is one of those things where you would then be able to back out of the transaction and then also get your earnest money back. With this in mind, if you are 3 days away from close and you decide that you just don't want the house and you have no other contingencies really to play with because you have the fact that you've gotten past the inspection period or that contingency and you found everything was fine. And then number 2 is if you got past the financing inspection or financing portion of that contingency and you are all good to close, and 3 days before you're like, I don't want to buy this home. Again, that choice is yours, but realize that you are then risking your earnest money, and it will most likely go to the seller because of the fact that we've done all this work, done all these things, and that's kind of the compensation that the seller would get for having a transaction with you. If you have any other questions about this, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if you found this content helpful, it would be greatly appreciated if you could like, subscribe, and share this content.